I've been interested in cinematic FPV for over a year now. In the past couple of months, something in me just snapped and I made a commitment to myself that I was gonna get into this hobby. Now, I'm about a month into this hobby and this has been the craziest hobby I've ever had. Starting out, I felt like I wasn't prepared. From many crashes to almost a broken GoPro, here's 8 tips I wish I knew before flying FPV drones. So as you can see from the previous clip, I'm still a newbie. I still have a lot to learn, and these tips are just based on my experiences. So let's get into it. Tip number 1, I wish I had practiced with 30 degrees in the sim until I got comfortable with my drone. When flying FPV drones, you can customize the angle of the FPV camera so that as you pitch forward, your camera is aligned with the horizon. So you can also do this in the simulator. I started off at 0 degrees to get used to it, moved up to 30 degrees, and then I eventually moved up to 57 degrees, which is pretty fast. I think that's like this.
You don't know what you're talking about.
I got pretty good at it in the simulator, and that's the problem. I got so used to flying at 57 degrees that when I finally got my drone, flying at 0 degrees was just so foreign to me. I couldn't bump it up to 57 degrees because that's just way too fast for my first flight. I eventually got used to it after a few crashes. And now I only ever fly at 30 degrees, both in the simulator and in real life. When practicing in the simulator, start off at 0 degrees so you can get the hang of flying, move it up to 30 degrees, and don't go higher until you get your drone. If you really want to move it up the degrees, do it based on your skill level with the drone, not the simulator. Tip number 2, absolutely make sure your radio transmitter is compatible with the drone you're planning on purchasing, which I did and did not. It's complicated. So your radio transmitter connects to the receiver on your quad. They both have to have compatible protocols. FrSky, Futaba, Spectrum, FlySky, I don't know them all. Some radio transmitters are only compatible with one protocol. Some are compatible with multiple, like this one. The radio I first bought was the Beta FPV Radio Lite 2SE, which is compatible with multiple protocols, including my drone's receiver, the FrSky XM Plus. See, I did my research.
Good job.
Only that if I had done a deeper research, I would have found out that yes, this is compatible, but it may require a firmware update, which for some reason you can't do on this radio transmitter. So you have to do it on your receiver's transmitter, which is a very complicated process. At least it's complicated for me.
Dumbass.
I just ended up buying a new radio transmitter, the Jumper T-Lite, which is a great radio, by the way. The Beta FPV one just is collecting dust, so $60 down the drain. That's when I realized that this hobby is way more complex than I thought. Bonus tip, if you're having trouble binding your radio to your quad, try stepping back a few feet. Apparently, there's such a thing as too much signal. Yeah, I wish I had known this before spending hours just staring at my transmitter.
Just calm down.
I am coming.
Tip number 3. I wish I started off with a micro FPV drone instead of a 5-inch drone. So I went straight from the simulator to the 5-inch drone. And I thought the simulator would be enough to prepare me. And it did, but I felt like I would have been more prepared if I started with a micro FPV drone. So in the simulator, there are no consequences, right? You crash, you just restart the game. You crash with a 5-inch, you could be f***ed. Seriously, the drone will be okay for the most part, but if you crash into something fragile, or worse, into somebody, again, you're f***ed. A good in-between is a micro FPV drone, which is as small as your palm. And these things are really durable. They probably won't break if you crash and are very unlikely to break something or someone. I mean, hurt someone. The simulator helped prepare me, but it's very different flying in real life. And it really freaked me out flying a drone that can do some damage, which affected my performance. Tip number 4. I wish I picked a better spot for my first flight. See, the problem with my first spot was that there were way too many trees. I knew I needed an open spot, but in my head, I was thinking like, oh, I did the sim, I'll be fine. Nope. Adding on to the fact that I wasn't used to flying with 0 degrees, I freaked out and crashed into a tree. So yeah, just choose an open spot, make sure there's nothing around. No trees, nothing around. Bonus tip, practice disarming your quad before flying seriously. Here's what I mean. Arm it, take off a bit, just a tiny bit, so it's a little off the ground, and then disarm it. And keep doing this until it's a habit. See, this will get you into the habit of disarming it when you are about to crash or lose signal, which could further damage it. Tip number 5. I wish I didn't attach my GoPro for my first flying session. Why? Because this could happen. See, GoPros are tough, but the thing about FPV drones is that they are tougher and they crash harder. It doesn't matter how prepared you are, you might crash on your first flight or something could go wrong and your GoPro could break. On one of my first flying sessions, I thought I was ready. So I attached my GoPro, and as soon as I switched on my transmitter, the drone just shot up into the sky. And I realized I left the throttle stick all the way up and the arm switch on. I know, rookie mistake.
The reason that bad things happen to you is because you're a dumbass.
Luckily, it crash landed into an empty grassy field. Unluckily, is that even a word? It crash landed upside down, GoPro first. I'm guessing from like 100 feet or so. When I went to go get it, the drone was okay, but the GoPro wouldn't turn on. It was at this point I knew I was out of my depth. Thank God when I got home and I plugged in the GoPro, it turned on, it was okay. I know it wasn't out of battery because it said 90%, so something happened for sure. Do not make the same mistake I did. Please check and make sure your arm switch is set off and your throttle is all the way down when you're turning on your drone. Tip number 6. I wish I took the time to check the quad for any loose cables. So, I've gone through 4 LiPo batteries because I didn't know this tip. A usual LiPo battery has 2 cables. One that plugs into the drone and powers it, and the balance plug, which you usually use to charge it, but during flight, it just hangs there. If this plug is not properly checked or tucked away, it could get in the way of the propeller. And if it gets in the way of the propeller, the plug could get destroyed. The thing is that I still tucked it away and it still got ripped apart. I eventually, after 4 batteries, ended up zip tying the 2 cables, so there's absolutely no way for it to get loose and get ripped apart by the propellers. But if this ends up happening to you, be very careful, because if any of the exposed wire tips touch each other, it will cause a spark. What I did is I taped each individual tip to make sure they don't accidentally spark. Tip number 7. Don't overestimate your abilities. You have to slowly work your way up while at the same time being careful. Just because you can do it in the simulator doesn't mean you can do it in real life. Yep. Tip number 8. Your first flight at a new location should always be a scout flight. Take the time to take a look around the area, make sure it's clear, make sure no one's around, and any possible issues you may have. I recently just flew my drone at Imperial Sand Dunes, and sand dunes have always been a favorite location of mine, so I was pretty excited. All that was cut short because I didn't do a scout flight. Every flight I had was a crash landing, and I had like 3-4 flights. The thing about flying in the sand dunes is that everything is the same color, besides the sky, of course. So it could be really hard to judge how far away you are from the ground. If I had done my scout flight from a safe altitude, I would have found this out and adjusted accordingly, but I didn't. Sand got in my motors, I broke an ND filter. Luckily, nothing else happened. Again, I'm still new at this hobby and I still have a lot to learn, and all of these tips are just based on my experiences. So if any of these tips helped you out, like this video and subscribe, and thanks for watching.